We are heading into Week 12 fantasy football, and we still have defenses like the Houston Texans and the Denver Broncos who are giving you game-changing performances. The right defense absolutely can win you a week, so just make sure to go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support, because I'm the only fantasy YouTuber who covers defense multiple times a week. So getting into our first tier right here, we've got the Denver Broncos at the Las Vegas Raiders this week. So obviously this one has multiple layers to it. The Denver Broncos have been absolutely fantastic defensively this year. They have 39 sacks through 11 games played, which means they're averaging more than 3 sacks per game. Actually getting closer to 4. 3.5 sacks is basically what they're averaging on a per game basis. They're taking the ball away at a consistent level. And really, I think it's been the difference for the Denver Broncos is that they're remarkably healthy heading into Week 12. Like, they're one of the last few teams that has like 90% of their starters actually fully healthy and out there playing for them. And it's mostly on the defensive side that they don't have really many injuries at all. The Las Vegas Raiders, on top of that, are tied for the most giveaways. We already know the Raiders offense is a total disaster zone. That is a tire fire with Gardner Minshew at quarterback, and basically when asked, like, yeah, is Gardner Minshew still your guy? Head coach Pierce was like, yeah, I guess so. Like, he's so over it because he sucks, but they've got no choice. They box themselves in. I think that the Broncos are going to absolutely destroy the Raiders defense and route to another good fantasy performance on defense. And at number 2, I've got the Houston Texans this week versus the Tennessee Titans at number 2. Listen, the Houston Texans defense obviously just scored another touchdown on defense on Monday night versus the Dallas Cowboys. Realistically, if you watch that game, and I don't blame you if you didn't, but I watched that whole game, there was at least 2 to 3 that I can remember interceptions that were dropped, and one of those was probably going to go for a pick 6. They could have had easily 2 defensive touchdowns in that game. The Houston Texans defense is actually stellar. They're just not quite as healthy as the Denver Broncos. They've still got to get Will Anderson back into the fold to really get up that, just the pass rushing attack to really what it can be. But ultimately this week doesn't matter that much. They're taking on the Tennessee Titans at home, and Tennessee's tied for 3rd in giveaways this year. Tennessee with Will Levis, it's just, that guy is Santa Claus. Like, that guy gives gifts on a weekly basis to whoever he's playing. It's an atrocious offense. The Texans are a magnificent defense, and they're at number 2 this week. And at number 3 to round out this tier, the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Cleveland Browns. Now, here's the deal. I'm going to get the good stuff out of the way, right? The Browns have had 6 giveaways in the last 4 games. And mind you, all those were with Jameis Winston. The Steelers have had 8 takeaways the last 4 games. So this should like theoretically be a Steelers massive like turnover type of week, and they also get after a weaker Browns offensive line. So why are they at number 3 instead of at number 1? Because I can honestly understand the argument when you have one of the lowest over-unders of the week attached to this one. The reason why is I think that with this low over-under, it's actually giving me the type of vibe that like the Steelers may come out and lay an egg. I have nothing to back this up. Obviously, like I said, numbers support this, and I do believe the Steelers ultimately will be a good defensive play. I've got them down here at 3 to kind of safeguard myself against a potential disaster week. I don't think it will be a disaster, but I do think there's a possibility they do disappoint. It's a divisional game. It's a short week on a Thursday night. Anything could happen in these types of games, but I do ultimately think the Steelers are a great defensive play. Now, dropping out to our next tier right here, we've got the Vikings defense at number 4, and they're at Chicago this week taking on the Chicago Bears. So with the Vikings defense, obviously they've been fantastic. They're top dog defensively. They're the number 1 defense, and they have been absolutely just like they're attack dogs out there against every offense they play against. They've got 19 total turnovers this year on defense and 35 sacks. They're getting after everybody and anybody who stands in their way. And the Bears offense, I will say this, like they've obviously been bad for a large part of the year. But the 1 week without Shane Waldron is their offensive coordinator, they almost beat the Green Bay Packers, and they've only had 1 giveaway the last 4 weeks. So as bad as like they've been offensively, as far as moving the ball and scoring points, they don't usually give the ball away too much. But also, the Vikings have 7 takeaways the last 4 games. I think the Vikings will be a good play this week, but ultimately, I do, again, kind of safeguard myself a little bit from a little more of a mediocre week because they are taking on a divisional opponent who don't turn over the ball too much. The Chiefs defense at number 5 here. At the Carolina Panthers, I can already hear this one. People won't understand why the Chiefs are so low. Why aren't the Chiefs at number 1? They should be at number 1, or at least in tier 1. Listen, the Chiefs obviously have a great theoretical matchup right here. Let me just get into the meat of this one, though. The Chiefs defense, the reason why I've been lower on them this year in fantasy football than previous years, if you've been watching my defensive rankings for years now, is because the Chiefs have had 9 takeaways this year. 9 takeaways through 10 games. That's less than 1 turnover per game forced. You know who actually is beating them in turnovers? Carolina. Their defense has 11 total takeaways this year. That's not good. And the Chiefs have 1 takeaway in the last 3 games. They're just not getting after the ball that much. And they're not getting after the quarterback that much either. They're not really a sack-friendly team. Now, the Panthers do have 4 giveaways in the last 3 games. Again, ultimately, the Chiefs will be a good play here. But what I ultimately stand by here is that the Chiefs are not some tremendous fantasy defense. They haven't been all year, and I don't think it changes this week, even against a weaker opponent. The Commanders' defense at number 6 to round out this tier because they're taking on the Dallas Cowboys. Honestly, you could make the argument to me that they should be above the Chiefs. I very much consider this. They are so close in my rankings. You might as well move up the Commanders to number 5 if you really wanted to. Washington has 4 takeaways the last 4 games. Their defense has actually been pretty decent in the last month or so. Dallas, on the other hand, my God, 7 giveaways the last 2 games. 2 games, 7 giveaways. And actually, should have been probably 10. Because as I said earlier, the Texans dropped at least 2 to 3 interceptions on Monday night. They had more in them. They just had some stone hands on defense. So the Cowboys have been horrific with Cooper Rush. Even though Rush looked a little bit better, he was still giving the ball away like candy. So I just don't see how the Commanders are not a top 6 play this week. And I also don't see how Matt Stafford doesn't hit his projection this week on Underdog, because it's 0.5 total yards. This is free money won for new customers right here. And if you want to take advantage of it, go down in the comments and grab the link that's there and use code FFN to sign up for Underdog. When you use that code to sign up and take advantage and hit the higher on this Matt Stafford projection this week, they will match your first deposit 50% up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Now, dropping out to our next tier, we've got the Bears defense at number 7 versus the Minnesota Vikings. Now, listen, the Bears defense has actually been bad since they came out of the bye. I've said this over the weeks. I don't think that the Bears defense is what they have been for the majority of the year. They have 4 takeaways the last 4 games. Not a bad number, but when you look at their first, before the bye week, they were turning the ball over like twice every game. So it's just not quite as much there with the Bears defense as it was. The Bears also dropped from 3 sacks per game to less than 2 sacks per game since the bye week. Again, don't love the Bears defense right now, but the Minnesota Vikings, I've been saying this for weeks, their offense is showing cracks now. They have 7 giveaways the last 3 games. Sam Darnold doesn't look like as good as he did because defensive coordinators have figured this offense out. Their playmakers, Aaron Jones, is starting to lose a step a little bit because he's an older player and he's often injured. This offense is beatable. And the Bears defense at home, I think they're going to be looking for a bounce back. They showed much more effort competitively last week after they fired Shane Waldron. Looks like that team may be banding out together. And honestly, I do think the Bears could end up sneaking out a win, but I've got them at number 7 this week. The Lions defense at number 8. They're taking on the Indianapolis Colts. The matchup is obviously, doesn't really matter. The Colts matchup, it's better than what they had with the Jags last week, obviously. But honestly, I don't think it matters. The Lions are they're playing in a different class than every other team in the league right now. They have 8 takeaways the last 4 games. They're just after everybody. Since Aiden Hutchinson, they've actually been kind of a better defense in fantasy. They're so physical and so aggressive at the point of attack. Now, the Colts, here's their situation. They had 1 giveaway last week versus the New York Jets. With Anthony Richardson, that was his best game we had seen in his entire career. But let's put this into context. The Jets defense is no match for the Lions defense. That defense may even be tougher than the Jets' low-life defense, which is exactly what the Jets are in fantasy football. They're not low-lives, obviously, individually. They're just not good defensively. So I think the Lions defense ultimately still has a good week. And I've got the Bucs defense here at number 9. Honestly, it's only because they're playing the Giants in New York. Listen, they're both coming off a bye week, so I don't think either one of them has a leg up over the other. The Bucs defense has been bad. They don't take the ball away a ton, and they're also not getting after the quarterback a bunch. What they do a lot is they give up a ton of points. How do you give up points to Tommy DeVito at quarterback? Tommy Cutlass at quarterback, it's just do you give up 30 points? I can't see it. You know what I'm saying? I just don't see how the Bucs end up giving up more than 20 points in this game. And I can definitely see how they get a turnover or two in this game, and maybe even a sack or two, because the Giants' offensive line isn't any good either. So this is just kind of a unique matchup where the Bucs find themselves at the bottom of the third tier. Dropping down to our next tier and our final tier. The Dolphins defense at number 10 versus the New England Patriots. Now again, matchup is a big one here. The New England Patriots, I will say this, they're showing fight on a weekly basis. I give a lot of respect to that team. Drake May is actually looking pretty good, but it doesn't take away from the fact that he does turn the ball over at least once a week. That's basically what we're looking at here. The Dolphins defense, again, like the Bucs, they're not very good. Their defense has had opportunities this year, and they're just not hitting big weeks. That's why they're ultimately down here at 10, is that even with a matchup like this, they're just not hitting the big plays necessary for a big week in fantasy on defense. So I'm safeguarding myself at 10. Not even really a safeguard. It's just a reality of their situation, because they've been anti-big play, and sometimes they take advantage of a good matchup, but just not getting the big plays. And at number 11 and 12, I've got the 49ers and Packers. Now listen, the over-under says a different story here. This is a pretty high over-under of the week. I actually don't think it's going to be that high scoring. It wouldn't surprise me if it did, but I just kind of have a hunch this one won't be. And take away my hunch for a second, right? Both of these defenses have been really good in fantasy for the majority of the year. The 49ers defense is really aggressive with turnovers, and they've been good throughout the year. The Packers defense started out the year super aggressive turning the ball over, but over the last month, they haven't actually had that many picks, that many fumble recoveries. Their defense is kind of taking a step back. However, the Packers offense with Jordan Love, you can count on at least one interception per game. I love Jordan Love. I think he's a great player. However, that guy turns the ball over once a week. On the other hand, Brock Purdy has not exactly been playing clean football himself either. So ultimately, I think this game could easily become a 27-24 type of game. And it's not like that's minimal points, but if each team has 2 takeaways and a couple sacks on the other quarterback, this is where it comes into play and say, I do think that both these defenses could possibly give you a big game. Both of them won't, but one of them could. But ultimately, I think that they relatively have actually pretty safe floors because of turnover upside. And as I do at the end of every single defense video, I give you my favorite defense to pick up in advance for next week if you have the roster space to do it. And this defense has been so hot or cold this year, it's actually just kind of really hard to pin them down. The one thing that's been consistent, the Jets offense stinks. The Seahawks defense at New York in week 13 is a good pickup this week, because I just think that with the Seahawks defense, they have the capability and the personnel to be able to hit big plays, to be able to get turnovers, to be able to get after the quarterback, and the Jets simultaneously don't score that many points. Aaron Rodgers does turn the ball over, and their offensive line just really stinks. So let me know how your team's starting to look this week, and if you want to see the top 30 wide receiver rankings for this week, click on this video right here.